Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another reading of Narrowboat with me, Richard Vobes. This is LTC Rolt's story, published in 1944, but I gather written in 1939, so just before the First World War, which actually is interesting to know because he does talk about certain things which clearly, when we got into the Second World War, started to change, namely the farming principles, how a lot of farming had been left abandoned. Good morning to the lovely Julia, to Philip Hammond, to Audrey Forbes, to Turbo Stream, to Linda Kane, to Rami Bodicera and Fiona. Very nice of you to drop by again, and we're going to read chapter 11, which is called The Leicester Cut. Excuse me, yawning. A bit tired this morning, I don't know why. I slept reasonably well. That's probably why. Raining here in jolly old Worthing. And I've got a leak. Oh, I haven't done a Naked Englishman podcast. Damn it. Damn. Always forgetting that these mornings have changed my routine. I'm going to make myself a note. I'm going to make myself a note. Please don't yell and don't you gloat. Record. NE podcast. I should do that after the... I'm going to put this on the floor so I see it as I walk out the room and go, oh yeah. Oh, is that a good place? I suppose it's a good... I know what I'll do. I won't put it there. I'll put it with my phone because I'm going to pick my phone up. Good morning to Ben Reeve. Hello to you. Rita Loy as well. Excuse me. Right. Let's call time. Chapter 11, The Leicester Cut. Those who imagine that the Midlands of England have become no more than a vast built-up area should desert the familiar roads and railways and take a canal boat over the Leicester section of the Grand Union Canal from Norton Junction to Market Harbour. In all these 29 winding miles, the Leicester Cut, as the boatmen call it, passes through only one village. So sparsely populated is the country traversed, and so deliberately does the canal seem to avoid the haunts of men. Traffic, though it has increased slightly over the recent years, is very light, and we did not meet a single boat on the 3 days' journey. 2 miles from Norton we passed under Watling Street and the main line of the LMS railway, coming presently to the ascent of 7 narrow locks near the village of Watford. The change of level was particularly steep, involving the use of yet another type of lock. This was the staircase or riser, the top gate of the one lock being the bottom gate of the one above, so that there was no intermediate pound between them. Grouped in 2 or 3, they resemble a flight of gigantic steps climbing the hillside. There were 2 pairs of risers at Watford, and when we worked our way through them, there lay before us 20 miles of summit level, 400 feet above the sea. Just as we were moving out of the summit lock, we saw a horseboat coming into the first of the flight, so that when we came to the tree-girth mouth of Crick Tunnel, a little way ahead, we moored up and had tea, thinking to offer the boatman a tow through and save him the wearisome job of legging. What became of him we shall never know. Perhaps he also stopped for refreshment, for he didn't appear. So when a thunderstorm rolled up unexpectedly, we dived into the mile-long tunnel for shelter. As we approached the northern end, we could see vivid flashes of lightning and torrential rain lashing the water. So I put Cressy astern, and we sheltered in the tunnel mouth, until the storm passed as quickly as it had come, the sun sailing clear of the towering cumulus clouds. Canal tunnels do have their uses. We made a brief halt at the disused Crick Wharf while we obtained a supply of milk and eggs from a nearby farm, before continuing our journey over this lost and lonely waterway. So far removed were we from the walks and the works of man that we might have floated out of time. It became difficult to credit the existence of cities, and more probable that the canal would lead us to some enchanted Avalon, fair with orchard lawns, than to prosaic Leicester. Tall rushes and flags of innumerable varieties lined the margins, growing so far into the water and leaving a channel so narrow that on approaching some of the endless turns it looked as though the canal would disappear altogether. Yet the travelling was better than that on many canals twice the apparent width, for the water was deep and clear, and hour by hour Cressy kept her effortless gliding pace, only the laziest of rippling fans from her bows as she swung easily this way and that, following a tortuous course among the folds of the hills. Though we sighted the occasional farmhouse or an isolated labourer's cottage, our only companions, other than the cattle or the sheep grazing by the water's edge, were the birds. Coot and moorhen fled to the shelter of the rushes with a furious commotion of beating wings, indignant clucking, and frantically paddling feet. Swans sailed by with an air of aloof, slightly offended dignity, while now and again a heron would wheel away, borne up with some effortless grace on great grey pinions. As the thrush excels in song, so surely does the heron in flight. The swan loses her dignity. The swan loses her dignity in the air. The takeoff is laboured, wings flapping and feet lashing the water, while when in flight the action is ungainly, the long neck craning forward as though out of balance. The heron, on the other hand, rises into the air as lightly and as swiftly as blown thistledown. The slow beat of the wings is full of rhythmic grace, and the poise magnificent, the neck held back and the legs extended to make a perfectly horizontal line, like long tail feathers. On our first night out of Norton was spent at a disused wharf near Yelvertoft village, and the second in a wooded cutting near the mouth of the tunnel at delightfully named Husband's Bosworth. Before reaching these moorings, we had crossed the headwaters of the Avon by an aqueduct and passed the junction of the short branch canal to Welford. Probably few people realise that there are two Welfords upon Avon, for this is not the well-known village between Bidford and Stratford, with its famous maypole and luscious raspberry canes, but an unassuming place on the Leicestershire-Northamptonshire border, where the Avon is scarcely broader than a man's stride. Very occasionally, a coal boat trades to Welford, but the insignificant branch is of great importance in another respect, for it is a valuable feeder supplying the Leicester section, and through it the main line of the Grand Union, with water from two reservoirs on the ill-fated wolds of Naseby. This provision of an adequate supply of water to the summit is one of the lesser-known aspects of canal construction and maintenance, and is often a source of great difficulty during a long drought. On one such occasion, the canal company was compelled to take the drastic step of draining the whole of this 20-mile pound into the main line in order to keep the latter navigable. Midway between this junction and the tunnel is North Kilworth Wharf, where Mr. Woodhouse keeps the only inn on the canal. He is a boatman like his father before him, and the infrequent wayfarers almost invariably pause to drink a pint and pass the time of day with him, if they cannot arrange their journey so as to moor for the night beside his own boats at the wharf. Like the Bull and Butcher, it was a friendly, intimate place, with an atmosphere poles apart from that drab and impersonal urban drinking shop. It was a damp and dreary evening of low-flying cloud and driving rain squalls when we called, and at such a time there is no more pleasant a place in which to be than the hospitable country inn. The bar more nearly resembled a kitchen, with its stone-flagged floor, scrubbed tabletop, and wide fireplace aglitter with copper and brass, highly polished in real canal fashion. We were very well content to sit drinking our cellar-drawn beer, listening to Mr. Woodhouse as he talked of canals past and present, while the burnished metal about the hearth awoke in the firelight to a lambent bloom that no modern plate or stainless metal can ever equal. Although this countryside would appear attractive enough to the townsman, there is a tragedy in its solitude which reveals itself to the more discerning eye in the deserted sheep-walks, the endless fields of ridge and furrow that have reverted to pasture, the untrimmed hedges, choked ditches and gates drunkenly leaning. The husbandman has abandoned his heritage for the get-rich-quick lure of the industrial towns of the Midlands. We met some of these new generation of countrymen as we walked from the wharf to the village of North Kilworth. The evening train had just brought them back from some factory or other, and they were hurrying homeward with their tin lunch-boxes clasped under their arms. After this foretaste, we were not surprised to find that the village epitomised. Sorry. I didn't realise that's quite so full on me, the camera. Let's just move that back a bit. After this foretaste, we were not surprised to find that the village epitomised the story of the deserted fields. The cottages, once thatched, had almost without exception been re-roofed with corrugated iron, while many stood empty and ruinous. The characteristic wattle walls, once also capped with thatch, were alike crumbling to ruin, their gaps filled with hurdles or wire. The rural arts had gone with the rural community, and the village was dispirited and dead. The only new life, a row of unsightly bungalows which had sprung up along the main road conveniently near the station. But before our journey was over, we were destined to see many more of these tragic epitaphs of broken faith, which were the result of the drift to towns, and were able to forecast the proximity of large towns without the aid of a map by noticeable impoverishment of the country around them. It's true that at one point not far from North Kilworth we saw a large pasture being broken up for plough, but the way in which this task was being performed belonged to the factory, not the fields. A most monstrous machine, the height of a house, was being dragged itself over the ridge and furrow on caterpillar tracks larger than any tank. The simile indeed was fitting, man having apparently declared war on nature and brought up his heavy artillery. In the tail of the machine, two sets of revolving steel tines, each as long and as thick as a man's arm, was tearing the ground like vast talons. High up, under a canopy in a haze of pungent diesel exhaust fumes, the modern husbandman, a mechanic in blue overalls, sat before a host of levers as far removed from the land as a passenger on a luxury liner is from the sea. The roaring of the engine, the groaning of the gears, and the dull rumbling sound of the steel claws as they tore through the ground combined to make a din that shattered the silences for half a mile around, so that I was thankful when we passed out of earshot. The advantage of these ponderous and costly machines is extremely doubtful. That no machine will ever replace the thatch on the roofs of North Kilworth, lay the hedges, rebuild the walls, or build a sound farm gate is quite certain. It was still raining when we cast off next morning and entered Husband's Bosworth Tunnel. But by the time we reached daylight once more, the sky was clearing, and before long the sun came out. This was fortunate because, scenically, these last few miles of the long summit level were the best of the 20. The steep, bracken-covered slopes of the Lawton Hills rose sheer from the water's edge as the canal wound around their flank, and opposite the land shelved away more gradually into the shallower upper valley of Welland. As we journeyed on, the hills became more gentle of contour and covered with woodland, to fall away altogether just before noon, when we sighted the whitewashed cottage which I knew marked the top of Foxton Locks. The descent at Foxton is greater and even steeper than the ascent at Watford, there being no less than 5 pairs of staircase locks having a combination fall of 75 feet. So abrupt is the change of level that when we first sighted the summit lock, the long beams with their white painted ends stood out boldly against the open sky until, on closer approach, a wide expanse of the Leicestershire plain came into view below. The paddles of these locks were extremely heavy, and we were assisted on our way down by the lock-keeper, who had a windlass with an extra long crank made especially for the purpose. He was a most kindly and helpful old man, having only one leg, but with the aid of a single crutch he made his way about the locks with the most remarkable agility and speed, balancing himself dexterously on his solitary foot when he wound up the paddles. Such a concentration of narrow locks takes some time to negotiate and constitutes a serious hindrance to traffic because boats are unable to pass each other except between the groups of risers. It was with the object of obviating this delay that the Foxton Inclined Play Lift was constructed and opened for traffic in the spring of 1900. Of all the many strange freaks that the mechanical age has produced, this was one of the strangest, and the photographs of the extraordinary contrivance which hang in the bar of the Black Horse in Foxton are well worth inspection. It consisted of 2 enormous cast-iron caissons, each capable of floating 2 narrow boats, these being mounted upon 10 wheels, which ran on 5 parallel sets of rails laid down the inclined plane. They were raised and lowered sideways by means of cables, one counterbalancing the other. A winding engine was employed for the extra power required. Unfortunately, the rails were constantly giving way beneath the colossal weight of the caissons, and the infrequent traffic did not justify the expense of manning the engine house or keeping a boiler constantly under steam, with the result that, after a very few years had elapsed, the lift was abandoned as a costly failure. All that we saw of it, apart from the two short backwaters that connected the canal to it, was a steel ramp of crumbling concrete up the face of the hill, overgrown with briars, and, on the summit, the ruins of the engine house. Canal lifts have never been widely employed, and the only one still in use today is the Anderton vertical lift at Northwich, which lowers boats from the Trent and Mersey Canal to the River Weaver, a fall of 50 feet. At the foot of the locks, we joined the Broad Canal from Leicester to Market Harborough, once an independent waterway called the Old Union, but long ago emerged into what is now, of course, the Grand Union system. Here, we turned aside from the main course of our journey, having decided to make for Market Harborough on our first port of call for letters, laundry and general stores. Occasionally a pair of Fellows Morton boats, or Joshers as they are called on the canals, in affectionate remembrance of the late Mr. Joshua Fellows, trade to Market Harborough Basin with the cargo of timber from Brentford, but the trade on the branch is very small. The swing bridge by which the village street of Froxton crosses over the water is kept locked, and the key, so the lockkeeper informed us, hung in the porch of the first cottage on our left, turning down the road. There seemed to be some subtle magic in this key, for when I walked up the flower-bordered path to the cottage door, the street was deserted, yet no sooner had I lifted it from its hiding place than the children of Foxton appeared miraculously from nowhere. Evidently the opening of the bridge for the passage of a boat is for them a unique and wondrous event. Some of the more sober among them helped me to swing the bridge, but this assistance was more than discounted by the majority, who jumped onto it for a ride. There were shrill shrieks of excitement and delight, and a total disregard for the admonitions of mothers who had come to their cottage doors. We breathed a sigh of relief when we had relocked the bridge and passed out of sight, although, to do them justice, they kept a respectful distance from the boat, unlike the children of the towns, whom we encountered later. When we left Foxton, we were reminded of the Oxford Canal at Wormleighton, for although it was only 2.5 miles across country to Market Harborough, the canal described a wide arc of nearly 6 miles around Gallow Hill, overhung by trees on one side, with fine views over open country on the other. The water was deep and crystal clear, but was in places so covered with dense blanket weed as to appear a solid surface. This weed was too fine to foul our propeller, but it repeatedly choked the strainer of the engine cooling water intake, so that for the considerable part of the way Angela looked after the helm, while I lay flat on the aft deck, with one arm trailing in the water, clearing the weed away. Such troubles only give an added zest to the navigation of little-used canals such as this, and it was with a pleasant sense of minor triumph that we sailed to Harborough Basin at noon on our 9th day out from Banbury. And that is chapter 11. I haven't pre-read the next chapter, but it's only a page and a bit, so we'll do that. We'll give it a whirl. Let's have a look at... I'm just going to move your comments just briefly, because the old... let the eye focus a bit. So, good morning to everybody. Thank you for coming again. That's very nice of you. Everyone's talking about I cannot sleep. I listen to Richard doing his daily... I cannot sleep unless I listen to Richard doing his daily reading. Oh, right. That sends you off, does it? Got bruises all over my right side, says J.W. Harville. What have you been doing? Oh, I paid for fresh bread delivery. Should have got me to make you a loaf. I would have cycled it over. Ramiboo says, depends on the kind of loaf. The kind Richard does, you usually put yeast in a small bowl, add a bit of warm water, start the preparation, etc., etc. Oh, yeah, quick yeast rises. Ready to go in about 3 or 5 minutes, whereas you're making sourdough, you've got to make a starter. Oh, yes, I must have a go at that. I think Kevin is having a go at that. He doesn't come to the readings. I don't think this is his thing, but I think he's making a starter for sourdough. I must ask him how that's going. Fellows Morton and Clayton were canal carriers based in Birmingham. Thank you, Adrian. That's I love it when we get these extra bits of information. which is superb. Sourdough is my favourite. Rita Loy says it takes me 16 hours to make a loaf of sourdough bread, but my start is active. I had a friend who mailed some sourdough starter to my brother, got it hot, and it exploded in the post. My goodness, yes. Watched a fair few vids, people doing just that. All right, everyone's talking about bread making. Fair enough. Why don't you? Why don't you? I believe Julia and her family enjoyed the loaf of bread, and I'm sorry I didn't get a picture in time. I should have insisted they send me a picture, but it didn't happen. When we went on the Worcester and Birmingham Canal, says the lovely Linda, in the 60s, it was almost choked with weed in places. The main reason I nearly blew up the boat and fell in. Yeah, I imagine that is a huge problem. Not so much now, though, because there's so much traffic on there. It is a strange world that we live in at the moment, isn't it? It's, you know, you can't help feeling that these people like Rolt and Priestley, you know, at the beginning of the 20th century, just before the war, really, I know money was tight and there was a slump and all of that, you know, take that away, and we didn't have the National Health Service and take, you know, all of those. But there's certain elements of a depopulated country, a shared culture, and I guess also a sad time, because the ends of windmills, canals, water mills, there's a big changeover. There's a sort of modernisation happening. But they sort of saw it before it was soured. And I can't help feeling now when you go on these things, you know, you go on the boats and cruise up and down, just as Fran and Rich does in Floating Our Boat. But you're not really seeing it for real. There's almost a slight artificial element to it that when Rolt was writing just before the war, right at the end of the main industry of the canal boats, when it was used for the purpose it was built for, clearly there's sorrow coming out of his text here of how things are changing, and we've grown up with all those changes, but he you know, there's so much of that, and that, to me, it just speaks so vividly and sharply to me of the lost skills and the lost traditions and the things that gave people meaning. I mean, you know, making bread as I did yesterday, and I've been experimenting with making anything with your hands rather than the shop bought stuff. I mean, you know, I can't make microphones and I can't make cameras, so that's, you know, there's no point even trying, because you'd spend a lifetime trying to learn all the different skills in order to do that, of course. But some of the more simpler stuff that we can do, growing your own food, you know, the basics of life, it does in some way seem strange that we have distanced ourselves from that, and that we let other people do that for us, that I can't think of the word that I want. We have when you let other people do it, I can't think of the, I know the word I want. Well, I know there is a word, and I'm looking in the lexicon of the words that I know, and I can't think of what the, you know, you've delegated, I suppose. You've delegated these primeval tasks, these important things that we could do for ourselves. And I think there's a certain pride. You know, I can see where Mr. Suggett absolutely gets immense satisfaction of putting on the table a plate of potatoes and various veg from stuff that he's grown himself, and the ease of which we just hand over the mass production of food, so that we can go and keep up with the Joneses and have a a house with all the latest mod cons, so that you can say to Alexa, turn the lights on, or play this piece of music, or turn the central heating up, which we could do ourselves. I don't understand why we keep letting the few basic things that show us that we are alive, that we delegate this to devices to do it for us, I just don't understand why we do that. I would never buy an Alexa. I want to turn things on myself. I want to be able to play records myself. I don't want to delegate my life away. I find it very strange. When I read that, of course, Linda, all our advice, we get all our advice from the politicians. You can send dry starter to someone and that will not explode. Oh yeah, dry starter, of course. I had another slice for breakfast. Yum, yum. There can't be much left of your loaf. I'm going to have to make you another one. I've got to make some more bread, I think, today, because my loaf is running out. I did go and buy some more flour. Obviously, it's going to cost me an arm and a leg in flour. We're going to have to get used to the new normal, and mark my words, we are going to hate it. Well, I'm hating not seeing people. Think of the vast change our lives since World War II, much of it for the worse, says Adrian. And I agree. I mean, we have that, it's very easy to throw away the baby with the dishwater and say everything is bad. Of course, everything isn't bad, the ease of which we got stuff. And I completely see that. But I think yes, I sort of said that wrong, really. I think it's very easy to throw the baby with the dishwater in saying that everything modern is great, and then looking back, and as a lot of younger people, my children, I think, my eldest son, Stanley, will think I'm too much of a traditionalist and think that, because he's not known any different. But I think you need some hardships to appreciate life, for one thing. And I think you need to be able to have to get up and do things. Otherwise, you don't, if you just lie in bed in the mornings and you don't get up, you don't realise there's a sunrise, or you don't go and not so much milk the cow. Nobody wants to do anything that's too backbreaking. But I think you need some sort of something to show you that you're alive. Otherwise, what is the point? But there's so many older things that we have that is so meaning and part of our psyche that we're so easy as a race to throw away. The art of weaving has been lost in America, has it? I've been making shortbread biscuits and tinkering with recipes as I go. Good man. Relinquished. Yes, that's a good word. Yes, we've relinquished a lot of these things, absolutely. My little village of Stoken Church apparently had 13 pubs in the late Victorian era. There were 4 when I was growing up 20 years ago, 1 left now. Yes, and I mean, pubs, that's another thing. Don't get me started with pubs. When you think the ingredients, like bread, beer, very basic thing, not difficult to make. And again, people used to make their own beer. Now we delegate this to somebody else to do it for our own, on our own thing. And we pay through the nose for it. And you think, it's mostly water. It's mostly water, barley malt, and yeast. That's mostly it. And hops. And all those things aren't terribly expensive. And yet it costs, whatever it is, £5 a pint. It is ridiculous. And, it doesn't cost that in the supermarkets. Life is so easy because I think what we've done is we've just, all those simple things, we think they're too simple. They're beneath us now, aren't they? Making our own bread, brewing our own beer, making your own wine. I mean, I know some people do it, but it's such a novelty thing because we're what? We're too busy sitting on Facebook. That's what we're doing. Or we're too busy sitting on YouTube and using our time to watch things like this, which is the irony, of course, is that we're not, I'm sure we've got time, but we pretend that we haven't got time because we've got to spend 2 hours on Facebook, haven't we? I mean, I don't. I have to spend certain time just answering my comments, but I'm dreadful on social media, absolutely dreadful, because I can't be asked to look at other people's feeds especially on Facebook, people posting rants about this, or a picture of a sunrise or something. I'd rather go and see the sunrise, get up and actually go out and have a look at it, rather than look at somebody's pictures of the sunrise. I know I'm running a website that, or running the group there where people can share their images, but I don't want that to be a substitute for doing it. And in fact, if it encourages people to go out and take the pictures, it means they've got out to actually see the bloody thing that they're going to be sharing. I'm with you, Richard. Besides, Alexa kind of creeps me out like a big brother. I couldn't. The Internet of Things, I think, is the most ghastly thing that is coming, and that we're going to, it'll be in all the products that we buy. It's all that control. I love hands-on work. I hate not being able not being able to do it anymore. Absolutely. I mean, it must be. That's the old age has a number of things going for it, in theory. Wisdom, in theory, being looked up to by the young for your knowledge of the world and worldly wise stuff and stuff. But at the same time, of course, for craftsmen or people who are used to doing things with their arms, and I watched my dad when he was unable to do things and strength was going, and the disappointment. And then as dementia came and grasped him, the most evilest thing in the world, absolutely the most vile thing, is dementia, and not understanding why you can't do things. And watching him, who was somebody who did things with his hands all the time. He was always pottering around and making things, and had drills and saws, and made his aerials and things for his business, and not being able to do it is the saddest thing. And you can think of craftsmen who, we're like in the Thule yard in the book. It's just so life comes with so many disappointments, doesn't it? It has those moments of elation, but it also has the hardships that and in the end, I think we're too busy trying to hide from life on places like Facebook. The first impetus of human is to become aristocratic and have servants. Nobody wants to dig ditches. Well, I think it's the labour, isn't it? I think if it's your own land, is it? I mean, I don't know. I disagree with you a bit there, Diana. I mean, you don't want to do it for somebody else, like the lord of the manor. I can understand that, because you're being paid, so you do it because you need to eat and have a roof over your head, etc. But if it's your own land, I don't know. I think people are different. I mean, some people will want to lord it up, of course, and say, well, you do it. But, I would take pride in digging my own ditches. I think you just have to have a certain a mental outlook, don't you? The older I get, the more I desire for the simple life. I absolutely agree. I would like the simple life, and to not have it, to have that denied us in this modern fast-paced world where we're overcrowded and we're being nudged all the time into, what they think of the simple life is sitting in a chair in a care home. That's not a simple life. That is prison. That is prison. Fably, I was hoping to find on Facebook so I could natter with you outside the BE. All right, lovely Julie. I cannot be bothered to look at people's profiles. I can be bothered, says the lovely Julie. I'm nosy. Yeah, I mean, everybody's different, of course. I mean, I'm only talking for myself. Shall I read a bit more? I'll read a bit more. What's the time? I haven't pre-read this chapter, I have to say, so I can't guarantee it's going to be good. But it's always lovely debate, always having this beautiful and lovely philosophical debate first thing in the morning. It sets me up. It's very kind. This is chapter 12, Interlude at Market Harborough. We had timed ourselves to arrive in Margaret Harborough. We had timed ourselves to arrive in Market Harborough on market day, for there is no better measure of the character of a country town than this. Yet, when we walked down the hill from the canal basin, the wide main street of tall Queen Anne houses was empty of the booths and jostling crowds we had expected. The answer of a passer-by to our inquiry explained all, and accurately summarised the position of the town today. "Go down past that cinema," he directed, pointing, "and you'll see the hall. It's in there, what's left of it." Following these instructions, we found the sorry shadow of a market which revealed that rural life in the district had fallen upon evil days. Our impression of the country around North Kilworth was confirmed, and the town might as well call itself plain Harborough, for as a market town it is dead. Its most active and prosperous institutions appear to be a corset manufactory, a canning works, and several saddleries. The inference is obvious. Stays and tin soup have become more profitable commodities than agricultural produce, while costly saddles proclaim that though the shires may be falling to the rack and ruin, they are the rich playground. They remain the playground of the fox-hunting rich. And that hasn't changed. In fact, that's got worse, hasn't it? I think this is 80 years ago. The situation's just got worse, and we let this happen. I don't know how we let it happen, but we do. We had a meal ashore in Market Harborough, dining one evening at a hotel which had been made famous by its host, whose unmistakable figure we had seen crossing the street when we first entered the town. The house stands in the main street. Its plain, but not unpleasing, facade of stucco, enhanced by a well-painted sign in a frame of wrought iron work, so intricately and cunningly forged that probably the work of a local craftsman, it rivals the best Spanish workmanship. A wide archway beneath, giving access to a cobbled courtyard, proclaimed a coaching origin. We found the interior decoration a trifle bizarre for our taste, yet because it displayed a certain independence and originality of idea, a tribute so sadly lacking today, we didn't feel disposed to criticise individual taste, however eccentric, being infinitely preferable to the pseudo or modern super cinema style of which the eye soon sickens to the point of nausea. For a very modest sum, we were served with a dinner which fully justified the reputation of the house, and which few London restaurants could equal at many times the price. It must be a difficult task to keep this kitchen supplied with its manifold needs, and the meal proved that it was possible, by the use of imagination, to escape from the inevitable roast and two veg, tin soup, and tinned fruit of the average hotel dinner. Yet, for all its excellence, I was disappointed to find that the meal was cosmopolitan in origin, and not, as I hoped, a revival of genuine English cooking. I have still to discover an inn where I could confidently take a foreign friend to dine and say to him, "This is English cooking." The culinary craft is yet another of the useful arts which have suffered eclipse in recent years, for had not the self-sufficient rural kitchen and all that it stood for been banished by the evil genius of the can-opener, there would be no need today to introduce foreign dishes in order to produce a good dinner. The average cook knows less of the value of herbs, spices and seasonings than did her forebear in the humblest of farmhouses, and yet what's more, she has lost the art of taking pains. Gone are the bundles of thyme, sage. I don't know what this is. Agrimony? What's agrimony? 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 And rosemary, which once hung over the hearth. And what of the others? Savoury, chervil, fennel, marjoram, and green tarragon, whose fragrances linger in their names. Their place has been usurped by the synthetic concentrates and bull in the bottle. I would not make so bold as to presume to teach the 20th century innkeeper his business, but because I am fully aware of the difficulties under which he labours. But this does not prevent me from creating the ideal inn in my imagination. First and foremost, I would free myself of the stranglehold of the big brewery companies by which most houses are literally tied. This would enable me to make my own choice of beer, or better still, to brew beer myself if I were able, just what we were saying. Furthermore, I could then lay down a good cellar of wine, as distinct from the vinegarish substances bottled at the brewery to promote the sale of inferior beer at the expense of the Englishman's palate. Meanwhile, in my kitchen, I would aim not only to recreate traditional English cooking in general, but especially to preserve from oblivion those dishes peculiar to the immediate locality of my house, and to make these my speciality. I wager that in this way I could obtain sufficient variety to satisfy the most critical, without borrowing ideas from abroad. And last but not least, my bill of fare would bespeak my dishes in plain English, and not in menuese, that ludicrous jargon that is a relic of smug Victorian gentility. I am afraid that such an inn will never exist in actual fact, and that if it did, it would prove a costly affair, so debased has popular taste become. Meanwhile, due credit should be given to my host of Market Harborough for creating a house of character and distinction in an unpromising neighbourhood the last sentence, always cock up the last bloody sentence. Meanwhile, due credit should be given to my host of Market Harborough for creating a house of character and distinction in an unpromising neighbourhood for such a venture. I mentioned beer, and it's so true. I love the idea of, borrowing other ideas from other countries. A very proud Englishman, Mr. Rolt, wasn't he? And very saddened by the demise of his culture. What he would make of the 21st century, I do not know. That would be, it would be dreadful. But some might say he was stuck in his ways. Some might say he was just not progressive. He was a conservative, clearly. Let's just quickly go through these comments. Lots of comments here. My favourite thing is early morning coffee in my garden, listening to birdsong. A simple thing. If a thing that is becoming, well, at the moment we've got birdsong, but ordinarily, you've got traffic intermingled with it. Money is the source of everything, not all good. That's true. It is. Money is not it's not the source of life, is it? But I take your point. Poor kid. I know my niece. That's Ramiboo, I think, talking to Juliet. Money and the need for power, if only over the neighbours. Yes, keeping up with the Joneses. Isn't it a weird notion that is, keeping up with the Joneses? I don't keep up with the Joneses. I don't keep up with anybody. Money may not be worth much if they kept printing it to keep us locked down. Yes, that's very true. Just trying sourdough bread. Bought it from the store. It's really good. That is the problem, isn't it? You can buy stuff that is really good from the store. And then, they've had years of perfecting their skill and having bigger ovens and, all the necessary gear to make things just that much nicer, which of course, when you're doing stuff homemade, you can't always have the bigger oven to make it absolutely, good. Morning all. It's a herb, Richard. Yes, I realised it was a herb. I can't remember what it was now, but I was trying to work out how to pronounce it. But thank you, Mark. A herb I've only seen in stores. Here we go. Agronomy. How do you pronounce it? Agronomy. Is it agronomy? is the science and technology of producing and using plants in agriculture for food, fuel, fibre and land restoration. It is both a humanitarian career and a scientific one. Agronomy has become to encompass work in areas of plant genetics, plant physiology, meteorology and soil science. A plant of the rose family being a slender flower spikes and spiny fruits. Native to north temperate regions, it's been used traditionally in herbal medicine for dyeing. I imagine, what's her name in Thingamajig? You know, can't remember her name now. How embarrassing is that? Kim Murden in Lewis. Had to seek the brain cells there. Mike says, I think Richard said agrimony and not agrimony. Oh, I could be wrong. Yeah, I may have agrimony. Agrimony. Is that how it's pronounced? Agrimony. That sounds better, doesn't it? Brew your beer, Richard, and use its yeast, malt, froth to make your bread. That's a good idea. Now you're talking. In fact, I'm tempted to get some malt from my next batch of bread or some frothy ale. That yeasty froth is called balm. Oh, nice. Balm. Agrimony. Agrimony. Agrimony, common tall spike yellow flowers. Thank you, Richard Upton. Not fully. I prefer earliers. Most sourdough in supermarket isn't anything like artisan. Sorry, Mark Donny McLeod. Sourdough or homemade. Oh, well, there we go. That told me as well. I must try and make some and see what it's like. I mean, you know, the satisfaction of being able to make things. That's what it is. Flowers June to September. Okay. So agrimony. Is it agrimony? Is yet to come up. That's a new herb on me. I never quite know which herbs to put with what. And I know some people put some herbs in their bread, don't they? Or into rolls. I guess you could put things like rosemary and various different herbs. Just pepper them in, I guess, at the last minute. I guess. I don't know. All part of the recipe. Chives? No, there's so much that, you know, and I think that's the other thing, just briefly. We rely on the supermarkets more and more to the point that we, you know, most people, most of the younger people, unless they're interested in food per se, or are on a course or learning about it or want to be a chef or anything, the average person, and this is a sweeping statement and I appreciate that, but the average person will think of a supermarket as the place to go to buy stuff and will not realise, because there's so many products there, to actually think that their choice is incredibly restricted. And I think people don't realise just how much your choice is restricted when you go to the supermarket, because the supermarket may boast of 70,000 products or whatever it is. But actually, when you go in there and you look for bread, you might have a certain range of a bit of olive bread and a bit of this bread and it's like, that's the only bread. And yet your choice, if you're making it yourself, is you could put anything in it, couldn't you? You could put sage and onions in your bread if you want. Liver and bacon. Well, I wouldn't recommend it, but you could do. That, you know, to expand your choice and what you can have, rather than what is bestsellers, what is the common denominator that is, you know, going to sit on a shelf of a supermarket. It's got to sell. It's got to sell. I hate apartments because they can't grow anything. Yeah, that's very true. The problem with, we could spend all day doing this. We could spend all day. The problem with, Mark says most supermarkets don't make their own bread. Morrison's own their own bakery, as does Asda and Tesco, in-house, but most sliced bread is brought in from large bakers like Warburton's of Burnley. Yes, and I gather that, is it true that most people like Morrison's and others will not necessarily make it, but just get, you know, the dough comes in and they bake it so they can say it's baked on the premises, but they've not, you know, you don't see the people at the back, you know, they're not up at 4 a.m. pummeling their dough. My issue is there is too much choice in supermarkets. How many shapes of tin spaghetti is really necessary? Well, obviously you haven't got to buy it. I suppose what I mean is, what I'm getting at is, yes, there's a huge choice of products, but when you look at those products, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, if you're aware that you can make stuff yourself and you don't delegate the job of making certain foods to the large supermarkets, you've got the choice of however you want to do that food. So you don't have to have the prescripted best-selling items that we're all told, that hype is saying this is really good for you and it contains 700 different varieties of preservative in it. Commercialism gone mad, isn't it? Says Julia. Bye, Richard. See you tonight. But cheers, Philip. Nice to see you. Fiona says, sorry, must go. See you tonight. Thank you so much for coming along. I used to grow my own vegetables, but I got a dog. And it dug everything up. Yeah. I mean, I haven't got a garden, much of a garden. My garden keeps logs in it at the moment. One of my whole wheat recipes I could send you is a herbal one, Richard. Whole wheat. Oh, okay. Not quite. That's all good. Thyme and rosemary, great. Potato bread with rosemary. Yum. That's me, who's never cooked a loaf in her life. Well, Linda, just watch my video. Now you know how easy it is. So easy. And fun and satisfying. I mean, I can tell you that loaf I had on the show the other night, not the one I made for the video today, the one I made, the others were abysmal efforts because the yeast wasn't working. But the one I made on the satisfaction of cutting that and thinking, oh my God, that looks like a loaf of bread I could have got from a local baker. I mean, I hopefully will get better and keep it up. I hope I won't just think, oh, it was a passing fad. I light my Essie most days, and the oven is there, and to be able to shove it in, to me, it's that the wood fuel heat and bread just takes me straight back to sort of Neolithic times, and talks to my primitive self. And that clearly is not dead. And there's something in that. Never mind all this, switch it on and instant gas and all of that. Going out there and chopping wood, getting the kindling, getting the thing lit, warming it up, pummeling the thing, I don't know. There is something. I know it's not for everybody. And when I'm 50, when I'm 70, I may not want to do that, of course. I may be sitting in a care home going gaga. But at the moment, it screams to me that tells me I'm alive. And I don't want much more than that, really. I have to go out and make a video every day. Of talking of which, it's now not raining so much. I was hoping to get out and make a video in the absolutely sheeting rain. And be standing there going, ow, it's rain. Now it's not raining. Now I don't know what to do. And I've got to think of a video to make for tomorrow. Or we won't have one. Can't have that. Do you have a patio or a balcony? He's talking to somebody else. Yes, certainly. It is the answer, and always given it's what the customer demands. Yes, this customer doesn't, says Linda. No, I know. I'm with you there, Linda. I am with you there. Right. Just bought a slow roast tomato sourdough bread from the co-op. Very good. Sounds delicious. I'll be round. Oh, no. Social distancing. Damn. All right, thank you so much. Been lovely to talk with you again. It's interesting how a book, just a chapter in a book, can elicit debate. That's what I love. That's what I love about these readings. It can elicit this debate that we can have. Fantastic. So there we go. All right, thank you so much for coming. Do take care. Have a lovely day. I'll be back again in the evening. This has become a way of life at the moment. And I will see you anon. Have a good day. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.